They posted the update at 11:47 that morning. One line crossed through, black ink, still wet when I walked up to the table, and my mother was standing 10 feet away in her champagne dress, already smiling. I am Wendy Myers. I am 34 years old. I am an ICU nurse, the kind of person strangers hand their worst nights to and trust completely. And on the morning of my sister's wedding, my own mother looked at me in front of a line of guests and said, loud enough to carry, "Why would we invite someone who isn't really family?" There were 120 people in those white chairs under the oaks. By the time the ceremony music should have started, it hadn't. My sister was standing in a parking lot in her wedding dress. My mother's phone was ringing, and she couldn't make it stop. And the man who finally halted the whole day with one raised hand, I had saved his life 2 years earlier in a hospital bed. I just didn't know his last name yet. What happened at that wedding took 12 years to build, and a signature nobody bothered to read to bring down. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where the quiet ones finally get heard and the secrets that ran in the dark get walked into the light. If you've ever been the person holding everything together while someone else took the bow, settle in. This story was made for you. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from tonight, and subscribe, because what was in that white folder on the coordinator's desk is the reason this story exists at all. Let me take you back 12 years, because the ending only makes sense if you know where this started. My father died of a stroke at 51 on a Tuesday in the parking lot of the hardware store he'd worked at for 2 decades. I was 22, one semester from finishing nursing school. My sister Chloe was 15. My mother Carol was 49. Within a day of the funeral announcement, our kitchen in Millbrook looked like a casserole convention. The ladies of First Baptist came in shifts with foil pans and soft voices. My sister fell asleep on the couch in her black dress 2 nights running. I did the dishes because my hands needed a job. That's a nurse thing, I'd learn. When you can't fix the big thing, you fix the small ones. On the 3rd night, I was carrying sympathy cards in from the mailbox when 2 women from the flower committee were talking low in the hallway. They didn't hear me stop. "That poor woman," one said. "2 girls, no pension. She'll lose that house by Easter." I stood there holding other people's condolences and felt the floor of our family tilt. That night, sorting the mail, I found a mortgage notice addressed to my father. Stamped in red. 2 months behind, not from the funeral costs, from before. My father had been drowning quietly for a while. It ran in the family. I found my mother at 2 in the morning on the kitchen floor, in her bathrobe, bills spread around her like fallen leaves, crying with her hand pressed over her mouth. The kind of crying you do when you've decided nobody is allowed to hear it. I had never seen Carol Myers be anything but certain. She ran bake sales like a general. She ironed pillowcases. And here she was on the linoleum, holding a mortgage statement like a diagnosis. I sat down next to her and put the red envelope from my pocket on the pile. Her face went scared and human for 1 second. Then she grabbed my wrist hard and something fierce came back into her eyes. "Chloe cannot know. Not a word. Not ever. She just lost her father. She is not going to lose the ground she stands on too." I said I could help. 6 months out from my nursing license, nurses get paid. We could do this together. She squeezed tighter. "Then help. But hear me, Wendy. Don't tell Chloe. Some help only helps if it's invisible." I was 22. My father was 10 days gone and my mother was on the floor. Of course I promised. I thought I was making a promise to protect my sister. I was signing away the next 12 years of my life. I just couldn't read the fine print in the dark. I graduated in May, passed my boards in June. Took a night shift IQ position 90 minutes from Millbrook because nights paid a differential and I needed every dollar. By August, the machine was running. Every payday, an automatic transfer left my account and landed in my mother's. She insisted on that structure. "Your sister watches everything. If checks appear with your name on them, she'll feel like a charity case. Let the household run through me." So the mortgage came current under my mother's name. The furnace got replaced under my mother's name. Chloe's school fees, the leaking roof, the car that got her to junior year, all of it wore my mother's name like a borrowed coat. I worked 3 12-hour nights a week and picked up a fourth. I learned to sleep at noon with a towel over my eyes. That first Thanksgiving, I drove home with a grocery store pie and sat at our old table. My mother stood to say grace. She thanked God for carrying us through. Then she smiled around the table, at Chloe, at my Aunt Renee, and said, "Tom's life insurance finally came through. We're going to be all right. God provides." There was no life insurance. There was a lapsed policy and a daughter on night shift. I sat there with pie on my fork and watched my own money get baptized under a different name. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit as long as Chloe kept her ground. That sentence would cost me more than the mortgage ever did. Here is what nobody tells you about invisible help. It doesn't just hide the money. It hides you. Over the years, I paid for Chloe's braces, her summer design camp, the deposit on her senior trip. Every cent routed through my mother, wearing my mother's name. Meanwhile, night shift did what night shift does. I missed Chloe's spring choir concert because I was holding a stranger's hand while he died at 4 in the morning. I missed her 16th birthday dinner because 2 nurses called out and the unit can't run empty. Each time I called to apologize, my absence had already arrived home before my voice did, wrapped in my mother's version. Wendy couldn't be bothered. Wendy has her own life in the city now. Big hospital, no time for small-town people. I didn't hear those lines myself. Not for years. I just felt the temperature drop. Chloe's texts got shorter, then politer, which is worse. A 15-year-old who loves you sends nonsense at midnight. A 17-year-old who's been taught you abandoned her sends thank you notes. She wore the braces I paid for in every school picture, and by the last one, she wasn't sure she knew me. You can't defend yourself against a story you don't know is being told. I wasn't losing my sister to time, I was losing her to an author. And the author was cooking Sunday dinner in the house I was paying for. Comment below if someone in your life treated your silence like permission. Comment if they only called when they needed something. Comment if you spent years being everyone's answer and nobody's question. Subscribe. Because what was in that white folder is the reason I finally decided to tell this. By the time I hit 30, my life in Columbus was small and clean, like a recovery room. 1-bedroom apartment, second-hand couch, a fern I kept alive out of professional pride. On the unit, I was good. Better than good. Charge nurses fought over me because I'm calm when it counts and I catch things early. 12 years of nights teach you to read a monitor the way other people read a face. The little dip before the crash. The rhythm that's technically fine and about to not be. I could spot trouble coming in a stranger's heartbeat from across a dark room. I just never turned that skill on my own life. When Chloe got into the State University's design program, I cried alone in a supply closet. Then I picked up extra shifts because the aid package covered half, and someone had to be the other half. Over 4 years, $38,000 moved from my account through my mother's hands into a parent portal with her name on the login. Tuition, housing, the good laptop a design major actually needs. When Chloe called home worried about a bill, my mother would say, "Calm as pond water, your father's insurance is handling it. Focus on your classes." That's how you thank us. That small word, us, doing so much invisible lifting. Graduation day. I drove down on no sleep after a Friday night shift and sat in the last row of the arena, still smelling faintly of hospital soap. I watched my baby sister cross the stage in a gown the color of cream and clapped until my palms burned. Down front, the family had a whole row. Afterward on the lawn, Chloe posed holding a glittered poster. "Thank you, Mom, for everything." My mother stood beside her holding flowers I had wired money for, glowing like a woman collecting a Lifetime Achievement Award. I got one hug. Quick, polite, her eyes already moving past me for the photographer. Then my phone buzzed. The unit short-staffed. "Could I come in?" I said yes. I left before the confetti was out of anyone's hair and nobody noticed the last row emptying. The efficient part, and I can almost admire it from a clinical distance, was this. My mother kept track of my schedule. She'd call, warm as anything, and ask about my rotation. Just so I can pray over your week, honey. Then family events landed on my working weekends with the precision of scheduled surgery. Every miss got filed in the story. Wendy's too busy. Wendy thinks she's better than us. Wendy forgot where she came from. Estrangement doesn't usually arrive like a door slamming. It arrives like carbon monoxide. Odorless, patient, pumped in by someone who keeps telling you the air is fine. I have to stop the family story here, because 2 Januaries ago, a stranger checked into my unit, and you need to remember him. Massive heart attack. 61 years old. Silver hair. Big careful hands. Bed 9. He came up from the cath lab gray as newsprint and spent 9 nights in my care. On the 3rd, around 3 in the morning, his monitor showed me something I didn't like. A little run of nothing much. The kind of rhythm you could chart and walk away from. I didn't walk away. I called the resident, pushed for the labs, had the crash cart outside his door before the alarm ever fired. When it fired, we were ready in seconds. He came back fast. Afterward, awake and embarrassed the way strong men get, he watched me reset his lines and said, "You were standing right there. 3 in the morning. And you were just there." I told him that's the shift. He shook his head. The night shift is when you find out who stays. He said it like a man filing something away for later. For 6 more nights he called me the one who stays. His badge showed only first names. Hospital policy. To that family, I was just Wendy. Iku nights. He went home on a gurney ride I wasn't there for because I was asleep with a towel over my eyes. His family sent a thank you letter addressed to Wendy the night nurse. Policy meant it was never forwarded. Remember the man in bed 9. 2 years later, he stopped a wedding with one raised hand. I still didn't know his last name. Chloe got engaged a year and a half ago. I found out over the family group text, a thread I mostly haunted like a polite ghost. There was a photo of a ring, a flood of exclamations from cousins, and a name, Eric Calloway, civil engineer Columbus, in the picture behind the ring. My sister's face was doing something I hadn't seen since she was 15. Pure unguarded happiness. I typed and deleted a dozen messages, then sent something simple, just to her. "Congratulations. Chloe, he's lucky." Dad would have interrogated him and then loved him. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared for a long time. Then she sent back a close-up of the ring with the caption, "I can't stop staring at it." 1 exclamation point aimed at me. When you've spent years on rationed warmth, you can taste the difference between courtesy and a crack in the wall. That exclamation point was a crack in the wall. I wrote back offering to help with anything. Planning, dress hunting, spreadsheets. Before Chloe could answer, my mother answered for her on the main thread. "Everything's handled, sweetheart. We've got our little team." 2 weeks later my phone rang. My mother, using the voice she saves for asking. Warm, low, a little breathless. The voice from the kitchen floor. "Wendy, honey, there is one last thing." Then we're square. I should have heard the trap arming itself. Instead, I heard my mother needing me. Chloe had fallen in love with a venue. The Arbor House. A garden estate just outside Columbus. White chairs under old oaks. The kind of place a design major dreams in. A June Saturday had opened because of a cancellation. The venue needed a $7,000 deposit in 48 hours. "The insurance money is gone," my mother said. Quiet, like a confession, which was a strange thing to say about money that had never existed. I can't swing this, but she cannot know that, Wendy, not while she's picking out her dress. Let her have this one thing clean. You already know the melody. Don't tell Chloe. Some help only helps if it's invisible. But here was the wrinkle fate had tucked into the fabric. A wire that size wouldn't clear from my mother's account in time, and the venue required the cardholder present to sign. Carol Myers, Empress of the Invisible, needed me visible for 1 hour. So on my day off I drove to the Arbor House and met the coordinator, a sharp, kind woman, about 30 named Bree Hartley. She walked me under the oaks, talked timelines and slid a contract across a white folder. "So you're the big sister," she said, smiling. "Chloe's lucky." I signed everywhere the little flags pointed. Client of record, Wendy Myers. Card on file, ending 4471. Day of contact, Carol Myers. Listed at my mother's request. So nobody bothers you at work, honey. $21,000 total. Deposit down. Installments through spring. Final balance due 2 weeks out. I initialed the guest list and changes clause without reading it closely. Who reads that clause? For the first time in 12 years, I put my own name on something. One signature. My mother drove home believing she'd buried the evidence. She had actually just signed her whole story up for demolition. And neither of us knew it yet. The next year ran on 2 parallel tracks and I only had a ticket for one of them. On mine, the deposit cleared, the spring installment cleared, and 14 days before the wedding, card ending 4471 paid the final $9,400 without a hiccup. $21,000, paid in full, time-stamped, filed in a white folder in a coordinator's office. On the other track, the wedding itself happened to other people. I wasn't asked to a single tasting, fitting, or planning lunch. The bridal party got announced on social media in matching pajamas, 6 girls, mimosas, my absence standing in the photo like a chalk outline. My Aunt Renee supplied the official explanation over the phone. Honey, your mom said you told her weddings aren't your thing. Weddings aren't my thing. I held that one for a while. I have worked Christmas Eve codes and held phones to dying ears so families could say goodbye. I don't get to have things that aren't my thing. Then 8 weeks before the date, a heavy envelope arrived at my apartment. Hand-addressed. Inside, in my sister's quick designer's print, one line. Are you coming, please? I mailed this one myself. I read that sentence more times than I'll admit. I called her that night. She picked up on the second ring. We talked for 40 minutes, the longest conversation we'd had in maybe 6 years. Most of it was beautifully unimportant. The dress, ivory, off the shoulder. Eric's terrible golf. The signature cocktail argument which she'd won. I lay on my second-hand couch with my eyes closed and let my sister's voice be in my apartment. Around the half-hour mark, her tone shifted. The way a monitor shifts when something changes beneath the surface. Can I ask you something weird? She said. Did you really tell Mom that weddings aren't your thing? 12 years stood up in my chest at once. I chose each word like stepping between wires. There is no version of my life where I would miss yours. Silence on the line. A working silence. I could hear her thinking, holding 2 stories up against each other, noticing they didn't match. Then her doorbell rang. Mom's here, she said. Dress stuff. A pause I will wonder about for a long time. Wendy, I'm glad you're coming. She hung up before I could answer. I sat in the dark with the phone warm in my hand, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Dangerous. Specific hope. My sister had stopped swallowing the story whole. She was starting to chew. My mother had always been able to smell an audit coming. What happened next I pieced together afterward from Bree and Eric and Chloe, like reconstructing a crash from the black box. 3 days before the wedding, the Arbor House emailed its standard final packet. Run sheet, head count, arrival times, addressed per contract to the client of record, copy to the day of contact. My mother opened her copy and saw the header. Client of record. Wendy Myers. And the arrival day line underneath. Our coordinator will greet the client at check-in for any final adjustments. Put yourself inside her arithmetic for a second. Tomorrow at that gate, in front of Millbrook and the Callaways and everyone, a stranger with a clipboard was going to greet the invisible daughter. By name. As the woman who paid for it all. The story could survive my absence. It could not survive my arrival. By sunrise, my name was off the list. I want you to see the morning I had in the hours while my name was being deleted. I was up at 6, off shift for the whole weekend I'd arranged that months back. The same week the invitation arrived. I steamed the wrinkles out of a pale blue dress. I wrapped the gift I'd been planning for 8 weeks. Our father wore a plain steel wristwatch every day of his working life. Nothing fancy, a hardware man's watch, scratched by 2 decades of lumber and ladders. The week of the funeral, while the casseroles multiplied, I'd slipped it off his dresser and kept it. Everything else of his got sorted and boxed and given away by committee. The watch stayed with me. 3 apartments. 12 years. In April I'd taken it to a jeweler. Cleaned. Oiled. New crystal. The old band kept because the wear was the point. On the card, I wrote the truest sentence I had. He'd have walked you down the aisle. Something of his should. I put the box on the passenger seat like a patient in transport. Half an hour of green June fields. Windows cracked. At red lights I practiced smiling in the rearview mirror and coached myself like a rookie. Stay near the edges. Compliment the flowers. Just be so present, so easy, that the story everyone had been fed about me dies of contradiction. That was my whole plan. Show up and be undeniable. I pulled through the stone gates of the Arbor House a little after 5, an hour before the ceremony. You heard the opening of this scene when we started. Now live it slower. The welcome table sat under a white arbor. Guest book open. Gift table to the side. Ahead of me, cousins gave names and floated through. Then me. Wendy Myers. The coordinator Bree, the same sharp, kind Bree from 13 months earlier, looked down at her list and her whole body stopped working. Her eyes moved from the page to the white folder in the crook of her arm and back again. The professional smile drained out of her face. I'm sorry, she said quietly, like it hurt her. You were removed from the guest list this morning. The line behind me went silent the way a room does when a tray drops. There was a fresh line of ink through my name. I could see it upside down, one stroke, decisive, still shining. That was when my mother appeared at my elbow, champagne dress, baby's breath in her hair, moving with the unhurried calm of a woman arriving at her own moment. Renee hovering behind her, studying her shoes. I said, Mom, what is this? And my mother looked at me. 12 years of transfers, of night shifts, of tuition and mortgage, and this actual grass she was standing on, and she smiled. The church smile, and she raised her voice just enough to reach the line behind us. Why would we invite someone who isn't really family? There it was. The whole architecture, out loud at last. Something in me went very still and very clear, the way I get when a monitor starts screaming. I nodded once. Then, today is the last time you'll ever see me as family. I set my father's watch, wrapped and ribboned, on the gift table with the other boxes. I walked back across the gravel, spine straight, gravel crunching louder than the string music. I did not look back. Nurses are good at that. The shaking comes later. So does the truth. I drove 20 minutes on Route 33 with my hands at 10 and 2 like a student driver. Then pulled onto the shoulder because the road had started swimming. I sat there with the engine ticking and did what I always do with pain. I triaged it. Airway, breathing, circulation, technically fine. Everything else, schedule for later. I called the unit and asked the charge nurse if she needed hands for the 7 o'clock shift. She laughed, then heard my voice and stopped. You're supposed to be at a wedding, Myers. Plans changed. I told her. She said she'd check the census and text me. I said great, cheerful as a greeting card, and hung up and sat there on the shoulder of a state route in my pale blue dress, understanding something about myself I hadn't wanted to see. For 12 years, whenever my family made me feel like nothing, I had gone somewhere I could be useful. Because useful was the only kind of love I knew how to arrange for myself. My mother had spent a decade calling me absent. And here I was proving her right on schedule. But here's what I need you to notice. Sitting on that shoulder, holding the ashes of the word family, I never once thought about the money. The final balance had cleared 2 weeks ago and I was glad. My sister would have her white chairs under the oaks whether or not I was allowed to sit in one. Love doesn't stop being love just because somebody crossed it off a list. Back at the Arbor House, Bree Hartley was opening a white folder, and everything my mother had spent 12 years burying was starting to claw its way up. That morning in the run-sheet rush, Carol had caught Bree by the arm. Family emergency, she'd said. Wendy isn't coming. Take her off the list, keep the head count clean. Day of contacts adjust guest lists constantly. Bree had drawn the line between checking on chair covers and a late florist. Then the removed name walked up to the table. And it matched the name on the folder she'd been carrying all day. Myers, W., client of record. Bree pulled the contract. There it was in the changes clause, the one I had initialed without reading 13 months earlier. Modifications affecting the client of record require the client's written authorization. There was no written anything. There was a verbal instruction from a day of contact to strike the paying client from her own event. And then worse, a public scene at the gate that the client had absorbed and walked away from in front of witnesses. In the events business, that's a liability with a string section. The venue office started calling the day of contact. In the garden, family photos were wrapping up. My mother's phone lit with an unknown local number. She declined it mid-smile without breaking pose. It lit again. She declined again. Some alarms you can silence. This one had a folder. The third decline was the one that changed the day. Because by then Bree had stopped waiting on phones and gone looking on foot. Eric caught her crossing the courtyard with the folder and a face that didn't belong at a wedding. "Is something wrong with the venue?" he asked. Bree is careful. She's told me since that she rehearsed a bland sentence and couldn't make herself say it. What she said instead was the truth with its bad showing. "There's a contract issue I need resolved before we start. The guest your family turned away this morning is the client of record on this event." Eric said approximately, "What?" She signed the contract. Her card paid for it. Deposit to final balance. I legally can't remove her from her own event on a verbal instruction. And someone did. Eric stood there running engineering math on the load-bearing facts of his life. He'd been told gently that Chloe's sister had drifted from the family, that they had invited her out of grace and hoped for the best. He had watched that grace at the gate an hour ago from across the garden. Not close enough to hear. Close enough to see a woman in pale blue walk away with her spine very straight. "What's her name?" he asked. "The client." Bree turned the folder around. "Wendy Myers." A voice behind them said, "Wendy." Eric's father had come looking for his son. He was staring at the folder. His hand went flat to his chest like he was checking his own sutures. Because Harold Calloway, 63, retired print shop owner, silver hair, big careful hands, is the man from Bed 9. 2 Januaries ago. Riverside Memorial. Massive heart attack. 9 nights in my unit, a wife in the doorway with her coat still on. The man whose monitor whispered to me at 3 in the morning. Whose crash cart was already outside the door. Who told me? The night shift is when you find out who stays. The thank you letter his family had mailed to Wendy, the night nurse, had come back undeliverable. He'd told Eric from the hospital bed. With the drama of a man freshly alive. "Find me that nurse someday. I owe her a debt this family can't cover." When Eric started dating a designer named Chloe Myers and mentioned her estranged sister was an ICU nurse in Columbus, Harold never connected her to anything. Because the sister came pre-explained. Cold, distant, abandon the family. You don't go looking for your angel inside somebody else's cautionary tale. Now he stood in a courtyard holding 3 facts that would not sit down. Wendy. ICU nurse. The woman turned away at the gate, who had right there on the folder, quietly paid for every chair in that garden. Harold straightened his jacket. He turned toward the ceremony lawn where the string trio was looping the prelude, and said to nobody in particular, "Hold the ceremony. Here is the scene my mother had spent her whole life building, and the scene it became. 120 guests on white chairs under the oaks. The string trio playing. My mother, front row, mother of the bride, champagne dress, hands folded. The widow who held it together, arriving at her coronation. And then the processional music simply did not start. The trio reached the end of the prelude and, on a signal from the back, looped it. Then, looped it again. 120 people can feel a delay in their spines. Heads began to turn. In the front row, inside a small beaded clutch, my mother's phone began to ring. The venue office, retrying, Renee from 6 rows back, texting in capitals. Then, Eric's name on the screen, a name that had never once needed to call her. Because the groom had stepped away from the arch. Which grooms do not do. The clutch shivered against her knee like something alive. Women on both sides gave her the sideways church glance. She took the phone out to silence it, and the screen kept lighting through her fingers, glowing between her hands. An alarm going off in the one room where she had no way to answer it. Bree appeared at the end of the aisle and bent to her ear. "Ma'am, I need you in the office, please. Both families are being gathered." My mother rose, smiling for the crowd, smoothing her dress. And in the office, face up on the desk where everyone could see it, sat the white folder. My sister looked at it, then at our mother. "Whose name is on the contract?" "Mom, I wasn't in that office. I was 20 minutes away in a diner, staring at a cup of coffee, still in the pale blue dress." The charge nurse had texted. "Census looks okay, but call at 7 if you still want in. 40 minutes to decide." Across the street, the hospital sat there being simple. Clean scrubs. Clear tasks. Monitors that tell the truth. Nobody in that whole building had ever crossed my name off anything. My phone lit up. A local number I half recognized, the venue's exchange, the one I'd seen on billing confirmations for a year. Business voice. The one I use for insurance companies. "This is Wendy." And my sister's voice came down the line, raw and close, with string music looping somewhere behind her. "Wendy, it's me. Don't hang up. I want to stop here for a second because I know some of you watching are nodding right now. If you've ever solved something quietly, at midnight, alone, while the people who caused the problem were sleeping, then you know exactly how this kind of tired feels. Leave a comment if you've ever carried a weight that wasn't yours and still never sent the bill. Subscribe, because the next few minutes are why I decided to finally tell this. "Chloe, aren't you supposed to be getting married right now?" "Yes," she said. "That's exactly the problem. Everyone's waiting, and I just found out whose name is on this wedding." "Is it true? The venue, my tuition, the house." "Wendy, is it true? And you know what I did?" With the truth finally standing at the door in its coat, I reached for the old reflex one more time. "Chloe, it doesn't matter today. Today is about you and Eric. Go get married. We can talk after the honeymoon." "Stop." Her voice cracked down the middle. "Stop protecting everyone. That's how she won. Every time you went quiet to keep the peace belonged to her. Don't you get that?" The diner noise went far away. 12 years. 3 apartments. A couple thousand night shifts. A little envelope stamped in red. A promise extracted on a kitchen floor at 2 in the morning. Some help only helps if it's invisible. I had believed that sentence like scripture, and it had cost me the exact person I was trying to save. My sister asked a third time. Slow spaces between the syllables. "Wendy, is it true?" "Yes, that's all. The truest word I own." And the first time in 12 years I'd said it out loud to the one person it belonged to. I heard Chloe start to cry on a borrowed office phone on her wedding day, not the delicate kind. Then she pulled in a breath. "Then come back. Please, I need you to do something for me." Out the window the hospital sat waiting. Simple as ever. Going back meant walking through a gate that had watched me get erased. It also meant breaking the only vow I had left. I had said, in front of witnesses, "Today is the last time you will ever see me as family. Where I come from, you keep your word." It's half of what I had left. I want to be honest about the next 10 minutes because they were the hardest of this whole story. Nobody was watching. That's the thing about real choices. They happen in diners. Alone with coffee going cold. On one side of the street, the hospital. The version of love I knew how to do with my eyes closed. On the other side, 20 minutes of road back to a place where my mother's words were still hanging in the air over the gift table. Staying gone would have felt strong. Clean, 60 years of quiet Saturdays. My dignity folded neatly, and I sat there wanting it the way you want a slammed door. But two things were in that booth with me. My sister's voice, cracked open, "That's how she won." And a sentence in my own handwriting, sitting on a gift table 20 minutes south. "He'd have walked you down the aisle." Something of his should. I'd written that about a watch. I read it now like a diagnosis. Silence was the family disease. My father drowned in it. My mother weaponized it. I'd called it love and carried it in both arms. Somebody in the Myers family was going to have to be the one who stays, out loud in daylight where it costs something. I put $5 under the coffee cup. I texted the charge nurse. Covered. I'm out. Family thing. Then I sat behind the wheel and set it to the windshield like a care plan. You're not going back for her. You're going back for Chloe. And you're allowed to come back changed. The drive took 19 minutes. The prelude was on its 11th loop. At the welcome table, Bree stood alone. When she saw me, she didn't say a word about lists. She turned the clipboard around so I could see it. Under the line of fresh ink where my name had been struck through, she had rewritten it. Big block letters. Underlined, Miss Myers, she said. You're on the list. I made sure of it myself. I have been thanked by families at 4 in the morning in every way there is. I still had to look at the oak trees for a second before I could answer. Inside the office, they were all standing. Eric, jaw set. His mother Pam, warm-faced. My mother in her champagne dress, gone gray. Renee by the wall. And a big silver-haired man who turned around, stopped, and pressed his hand flat to his chest. Bed 9, I said, because I'm a professional. Wendy, said Harold Calloway. The one who stays. He crossed the room and took both my hands, then his voice went hard, and he turned toward the garden. These people were told this woman isn't family. I say we go out there and tell them who paid for every chair they're sitting on. Every chair. Every flower. Every year. They should know exactly who they turned away at that gate. My mother closed her eyes, waiting for it. Her whole body braced for the machine she'd built to finally run over her in public. No. I said. Everyone looked at me. I kept my voice at the 3 o'clock level, the one that works. You'd be turning my love into a receipt, Harold, reading it out like a bill she owes. That's her weapon. It was never mine. I looked at my mother, still braced, eyes still shut. The truth is coming. All of it. But it goes person to person, on its feet. Today isn't a courtroom. Today belongs to Chloe. Behind me, the door opened, and my sister stood in it in full white, holding something small and steel in both hands. Our father's watch, lifted from the gift table. Tissue paper still clinging. You gave me something of his, she said. Now I'm asking for something of yours. Walk me down the aisle. She said it plainly, the way you ask for something you've already decided. The room went so quiet, I could hear the prelude looping out in the garden. That walk had belonged by every plan and program to our mother. Her flowers. Her aisle. Her town watching. My mother made one small sound, half a syllable, and then looked at her younger daughter's face and understood that the vote had already been taken. Chloe turned to her gently, which somehow made it worse and better at once. You'll be in the front row, Mom. That's where you'll be. Then my sister went to fix her mascara. Because there was, after all, a wedding to get to. My mother and I stood alone by the office window for about 12 seconds. She looked old for the first time in my memory. When she spoke, her voice had nothing in it. No sugar, no razor. Just a person. I didn't know how to be saved by my own child, she said. There it is, I said. The first true thing you've said in years. She flinched. I hadn't raised my voice. I used the one I use for hard news at 3 in the morning. Delivered kindly and completely. Here is what happens now. You're going to tell her everything. Every dollar. Every invitation. Every shift you scheduled around. All of it from you before Christmas, or I will say it once, plainly, and never again. That's the whole boundary. No punishment in it. Just no more editing. She didn't answer. She nodded. Barely. Eyes on the window. I have learned to let a nod be enough for one day. There was no hug. Anyone who tells you healing starts with a hug has never watched a wound actually close. It starts with debridement. And that part had just happened. Bree put her head in the door. Miss Myers, whenever you're ready. Chloe reappeared, bouquet in hand, and tied to its stems with white ribbon, face out, keeping perfect time, was my father's watch. The garden doors opened. My sister took my arm. We stood at the top of an aisle I'd been thrown out of 4 hours earlier. 120 faces turned. I was still in the pale blue dress I'd ironed at 6 that morning for a wedding I wasn't allowed into. Every guest in those chairs had heard, one way or another, that the bride's sister wasn't really family. Nobody announced a correction. No one read a statement. There was just this. A bride gripping the arm of a woman with tired hands and good posture, walking down the grass between the white chairs, slow, like they had all the time that had ever been lost. Halfway down, we passed the front row. My mother looked up at me. The church smile was nowhere on her face. What was there instead looked almost like the woman on the kitchen floor 12 years ago. Scared, tired, human, I had told her she would never see me as family again. Standing in that aisle, I kept the vow the only way a vow like that deserves keeping. She would never see me as her version of family again. The invisible kind. The crossed-out kind. The kind that pays and vanishes. Family isn't a list you can strike a name from. It's who shows up. It's who stays. It's who walks you the last 30 feet to your whole new life. I lifted my sister's veil at the arch and kissed her cheek and gave her hand to a good man whose father owes me a debt no one can bury. Then Harold Calloway stood up from the front row across the aisle, gestured me into his own seat, and said in a voice that did not whisper, "Front row is for family." I sat. The music settled. And my little sister got married that June evening, an hour behind schedule, under oaks on grass that love had paid for, invisibly no longer. The reception I'll keep short, because the best parts were small. Harold kept his word. No speeches about money, no receipts read into microphones. But during dinner, he came and sat beside me and laid an envelope next to my plate. Soft, creased, 2 years old. Addressed in his wife's careful hand to Wendy, the night nurse, EQ, Riverside Memorial. Return to sender, the stamp said. It finally found the right address, he said, and patted the table twice and left me alone with it. Which was the kindest possible thing. I read it in the parking lot. Later, in my car. I'm not going to tell you what it said. Some letters you keep for yourself. My sister and I danced to a song from her childhood that she didn't know I'd picked out with the DJ, and she laughed against my shoulder. For 3 minutes, the last 12 years were just weather that had passed through. Before Eric spun her away, we made a deal, simple as a handshake. Sunday nights, 7 o'clock, phones on, no agenda. We have not missed one since. My mother left the reception early. The town read it as a mother overcome by emotion. I read it as a woman going home to sit with the bill. The story she built still stands in Millbrook. Mostly, the church ladies still call her strong. A few murmur about the odd delay at the ceremony. Let them. Stories were never the thing. People are. In December, she beat the deadline by 9 days, which is the most Carol Myers detail in this entire account. A thick envelope arrived at Chloe's house. Handwritten, pages and pages. Every dollar. Every diverted invitation. The truth about the insurance, the mortgage, the tuition, the venue. A copy came to my apartment 2 days later with a single line added at the bottom. You were never invisible. I just couldn't afford for anyone to see you. It isn't quite an apology. It's an X-ray. And I'm a professional. I know how much it costs some people to stand still long enough to be seen through. I haven't been back inside my mother's house yet. But when she calls now on ordinary evenings about ordinary things, I answer. Some bridges you rebuild one true sentence at a time. We are, sentence by sentence, 2 women who no longer lie to each other. That's not a fairy tale. It's better. It's load-bearing. Last month, Chloe mailed me a framed photo from the wedding. Not the aisle. Not the arch. The gift table. Early morning, before any of it. A small wrapped box with a ribbon, sitting there patient as a heartbeat. On the back, in her designer's print, it was always on the list. It hangs by my door next to my badge. I touch the frame some nights on my way to the shift where strangers trust me with their worst hours. The man in bed 9 was right. All those years ago, in a dark room at 3 in the morning, he told me, the night shift is when you find out who stays. So does a wedding. And eventually, if you're very patient and very honest, so does a family. If you carry one thing out of this story tonight, carry this. Silence can feel like love. But love kept silent gets rewritten as absence by whoever's holding the pen. So say the true thing, plainly, without a weapon in it, while the people you love can still hear you. If this reminded you of a sacrifice nobody ever named, yours or someone else's, say their name in the comments today. Share this with the quiet one in your family. They'll know why. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.